Hey there, Doughboy here, and today on Hardcore Academy, let's do something a bit different. Instead of talking about a horror movie I love, I'm going to talk about a horror movie that I hate. Like the Nostalgia Critic says, I remember it so you don't have to. But with me, I torture myself so you don't have to. And today, on the first installment of Horrible Horror, I'm going to talk about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake from 2010. The original series was so good, and it is actually my favorite horror series of all time. I love Freddy Krueger and the creativity of the originals. So you can only imagine my disappointment upon seeing this movie. I originally had some high hopes for this before it came out. It was directed by Samuel Bayer, who is probably most famous for directing music videos like Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit and Ozzy Osbourne's Mama I'm Coming Home, amongst many others. And this is the first and only movie directed by Samuel Bayer. It's no wonder that he hasn't directed another. Stick with what you know, Sam. Stick with what you know. I was also pretty excited that the new Freddy Krueger would be played by Jackie Earle Haley. I thought he did a great job as Rorschach in The Watchmen, so I figured he would be a good pick to play the Springwood slasher. But even a great actor can't save a shit script. You can polish a turd until you can see your reflection in it, but it's still a turd. And you can spray all the cologne you want onto a skunk's ass, but it's still gonna smell like a skunk's ass. Anyway, let's get down to it. First, let's talk about the actors in the movie. Rooney Mara plays the character of Nancy in the remake, and I'm sure this girl is a great actress, and I know the director was going for a plain, everyday girl next door, but this girl is more plain and boring than Kristen Stewart in Twilight. I mean, what the hell? And the guys in this movie? They all look kinda new agey or emo. Like Jesse, who is the Rod character in this. The guy wears more eye makeup than my girlfriend. And let's not forget about Freddie. They gave Freddie a new look that was supposed to be more realistic. But they failed. Miserably. Freddie looks like the mutated butt baby of Clint Howard and Jocelyn Wildenstein. And in the original story, the fact that Freddie was a pedophile was subtext, and it turned out great. But in the remake, Freddie is like a dirty old man that grabs a girl's ass at the bar, then follows her home, then waits for her to go to sleep before breaking into her house to go swimming in her underwear drawer like a perverted Scrooge McDuck. And the new glove was supposed to look more like something that someone would build in their basement, and call it nitpicking. But I think the new glove looks like something you would buy in the dollar store for a Freddy Halloween costume. The movie starts out with the cannon fodder character of Dean, who was brought in just to die in the first 5 minutes. And Chris, who is his girlfriend or whatever, I don't really care, witnesses this, and then later, after the funeral, her mom is all like, "Sorry, honey, I have to go catch a flight. Never mind that your boyfriend just died and all. I'm gonna leave you here alone to be murdered. Peace." Then her ex-boyfriend Jesse, the guy that wears more makeup than my girlfriend, comes in to comfort her, and they end up spending the night together. She falls asleep, and Freddy kills her ass, throwing her around like a goofy rag doll, and then slicing her a little bit, and the scene was very bland when you compare it to the blood-filled original scene of Tina's death where she is screaming and being dragged around the room, leaving blood streaks before finally falling onto the bed with a splash of blood. That scene still sticks with me to this day, but the remake scene is very forgettable. I've watched this movie several times, and I forget it within a few days every time. At some point, we see the recreation of the famous wall scene where Freddy stretches out of the wall over Nancy's bed. In the original, it was a cheap and easy effect. It was just a spandex wall, and it looked awesome when someone pushed against it. But the remake used shitty-ass CGI that looked like it was made using an early Sony PlayStation game engine. Think about this for a second. $2 piece of spandex looks awesome. Expensive-ass CGI looks like shit. Stick with practical effects. They look much better. And this wasn't the only bit of CGI in the movie. It's full of it. And it all looks frickin' terrible. Anyway, Jesse comes in, covered in blood, to talk to Nancy and explain himself, and then he is arrested and thrown in jail. Of course, he ends up going to sleep and finds himself in the dream world where Freddie hunts him down. Jesse says something like, "Oh God," out of fear. In the original, Freddie says the famous line of, "This is God." But in the remake, he's just like, "No, just me." It's plain, it's stupid. Let's continue on. After killing Jesse, Freddie does say one of the better lines of the movie, where he talks about how after the heart stops beating, the brain stays alive for another 7 minutes, and they have 6 more minutes left to play. So the movie isn't entirely bad. Freddie has some good lines and some good jokes, but that doesn't save anything. The movie goes on to Nancy and Quentin, who is the replacement of Johnny Depp's character of Glenn from the original, and they discover that they are beginning to experience micronaps, where after they stay up for a few days, they begin to slip in and out of dreams even when they are awake, which is a great concept, but the execution is very flawed. That isn't how micronaps or microsleeps work. You aren't going to be walking around down a hallway and then suddenly see your dead friend being dragged along in a body bag. Now, I'm no neurosurgeon that believes the pyramids were used to store grain, but I'm pretty sure that microsleeps don't work like that. The two of them also discovered that they, along with their friends and several other people, knew each other since they were in preschool, when they thought they had only been friends for a few years. And they discover that this was because their parents had been hiding the fact that they were abused by a gardener at their preschool of bad hand. Bad hand. Bad hand. Bad hand? Really? Come on. Anyway, their parents wanted them to forget about it, which brings me to a few questions. You expect us to believe that an entire class of preschool kids just completely forgot about an experience like that? Really? I mean, sure, a few of them could have forgotten, but you expect us to believe that the entire class was just struck with this convenient amnesia of the events? Come on. And where the hell were the preschool teachers when he was doing this shit? You expect us to believe that no one noticed that children were missing from the group? I find that pretty hard to believe with a class of children that is that small. Anyways, let's continue. They try to hunt down the rest of the children to see if they are experiencing the same thing, where they come across an Asian guy that has been posting videos of himself, talking about the nightmares he has been having. And in his last video, he falls asleep and his head just smashes against the camera. If he died, then who the fuck posted the video? Oh, I got it. Freddy Krueger is a YouTuber. That's the only explanation. Blah. Onward we go. After a random impossible micronap in the middle of a drugstore, Quentin takes Nancy to the hospital to get help, where he just steals drugs out of a nurse's cart. I'm pretty sure that hospitals don't just leave syringes of adrenaline just laying around in the middle of the hallway. And why adrenaline? Why do they choose to have them steal adrenaline? Wouldn't it be more realistic for them to visit a friend that sells cocaine or meth? I'm pretty sure that Quentin knows some guys that could hook him up. I don't know. I just think that would make more sense. Adrenaline's a hell of a drug. Kids, don't do drugs. Drugs are bad. Okay? Okay. The two of them eventually make their way to the preschool they had seen in their dreams, where they discover some bad shit in the basement, including some pictures of little Nancy and some of Freddy's claws. Which begs another question. After Freddy was killed, or rather disappeared as everyone else thinks, no one that works there went down into the basement? The pictures and shit were hidden in the secret cave, as Freddy called it, but his claws were right out in the open for everyone to see. All that shit was still there. No one ever went down there to find it? What the fuck? The two of them then come up with a plan to pull Freddy out of the dream and into the real world. Nancy goes to sleep, and Quentin attempts to stay awake to wake her up when shit starts to go down. But before all that, he somehow snaps an old paper trimmer blade right in half. The blade is somehow miraculously devoid of any trace of rust, and how the hell are you going to snap one of those in half? Do you know how thick the metal that holds one of those blades is? That shit ain't gonna snap like that. Anyway, shit goes down and we see how much of a creepy perv that Freddy is before he is pulled into the real world when Quentin stabs an adrenaline syringe directly into the center of Nancy's chest. Now tell me, how in the fuck is someone going to stick a needle right through the sternum? Syringe through bone. Good job knowing anatomy there, Sammy boy. They kill Freddie, light him up like the heat miser, and peace out before heading to the hospital. And of course, like any other horror movie, there is the final scare. Nancy and the mom from the first season of American Horror Story go home, which isn't anything like the iconic Elm Street house, where her mom gets a claw through the face before she is sucked back through the mirror. And wait a second, there's no dad. Nancy's dad isn't a cop in this movie. She doesn't even have a dad in this movie. WTF, people. WTF. I'm done with this. Fuck this movie. This has been Doughboy with Hardcore Academy, and peace out. Fucking